So the way to memorize the fretboard is to So I get this question and I see the searches on YouTube, fretboard memorization. But how do I memorize the fretboard? What does that even mean? Are you trying to memorize the notes on the fretboard? Are you trying to memorize scale shapes? What are you trying to memorize? But really, the answer is the same. And it's the same way you learn the map of a city. How do you do that? You know, you have the city of Rome, you're looking at a map. Now, I say to you, in 4 weeks, you must be able to be a cab driver in Rome. And you must know everything, every street, how to go where, right? And without having a map. So people say, I want to get to the Piazza della whatever. And you know, oh, yeah, here we go, right? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? The answer is easy and it's obvious because it's the way we learn any map. We live in a secluded place, in a specific place for long enough to make it completely familiar, right? So you're in your apartment right now, wherever you are. Just do that now, right? And you close your eyes and say, okay, can you visualize the streets? If you're in a city, live in a city, or do you live on the countryside? Can you visualize everything around the house? Yes, you can, because you lived there. Keyword, lived. So how do you memorize the fretboard? You live there. You live in one spot on the fretboard. So if it's the scale shape, you live in 2 different scale shapes. For a week, for instance, you live there. You don't do anything else. You just make it so familiar that you cannot forget. Other keyword, cannot forget. Key sentence, right? So it must be so automatic that you just have blah, 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 blah. Yes, I know exactly. That's the grocery shop. That's the whatever. That's the shoe shop. If you go down there, that's a church. Blah, 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 blah. It's easy. You don't even have to strain yourself. You don't have to use any effort to remember the neighborhood you live in. That's how you remember the fretboard. So what do most people do? I tell you, they go... Right? You go up and down the fretboard like that. So once you're here, you've forgotten this, and once you're there, you've forgotten that. You get no sense of total, reliance on the scale shapes because they're always new. Because you move every time. You just move. You move around the city. If you live in one place for one day in the city, and then in another day, then you move the next day. How many years, decades is it going to take you to learn the whole city map? Forever. Because you never really get acquainted and familiarized with where you are until it's a new thing. So it's just everything is new all the time. And once you return to the first place you move, you might recognize some of it, but you got no clue, right? So the way to memorize the fretboard is to, whatever it scales, if you want to memorize the notes on the 2 top string up until the 1st fret and become so familiar with them so you can actually go E, like this. It needs to be so easy that if you look at this fret, you know exactly what note it is with no distance between looking at the fret and knowing the note. It's like if you watch a D on a billboard, you don't have to read it. You just have to look at it and it says D in your mind. Even with a word, it says dog. You can't not read the word dog if you're looking at it So it's automatic in your brain. There's no distance from reading and, same thing here. It needs to be automated. And how do you do that? By living there for long enough. Once you got the top 2 strings up to the 5th fret, you take the middle 2. And then you live there. You move out of the 2 top strings. You don't focus on those anymore. No, you don't. You just have the two strings in the middle up to the 5th fret. You live there. And every skill is only valuable if you master it. What is mastery? Living there for long enough to make it so familiar that there's no distance between the actual note and that fret on that string. This is a C, period. I don't have to analyze, say, okay, we go on from there, and then, C. Right? There's no process like that. It's just C, right? It's just E. No distance. You might as well write the letters on the fretboard. So you live in a secluded place, go on to the next, make it so familiar you can never forget. Never ever can you forget. It's like riding a bike. The body remembers. That's the way to do it. And if you do that and say, now I have the city, I'm just going to move to that place. Every day I'm going to walk the streets, man. I'm going to walk to that show. And now I know it's familiar. Then you move to another place. Every day, and then another place in Rome, another place, right? And then you move back to the first place. You might actually have forgotten a little bit when you move back to the first place, because you have to reacquaint yourself with the patterns. And then you go, oh yeah, that's how it is. But it takes you like an hour, right, of walking through the neighborhood, and then everything is in its place. The same thing happens here. You become ultra familiar with a couple of scale shapes, then you do the next, then you do the next two for a week, for a month, then you return back. How was it? Right. Everything you play is in those two scale shapes. Every time you practice over a jam track, every time you practice picking, you practice it within those two scale shapes for an extended period of time. You move into it, you know it so well you can never forget. Then you move on. That's the way to, what does it say? Memorize the fretboard. Oh yeah, so go subscribe and do all these things, and then I hope to see you in another video.